Exercise 7 is an overview of the skeletal system. The function of the skeletal system is number one for support. It also provides protection, allows for movement because the muscles attached to the bones. It functions also in both mineral and growth factor storage, blood cell formation, triglyceride storage, and hormone production. So several different functions. The skeleton is going to be divided into two divisions, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is composed of the skull, the vertebral column, and ribs. And then the appendicular is going to include the arms, the limbs, legs, any of those limbs that are attached. And the point of attachment to the axial skeletons, like the shoulder, the hip. In this diagram, it is color-coded. The darker tan color shows the axial skeleton, as we just said, the skull, the ribs, the vertebral column, and then this lighter beige color is the appendicular skeleton, the limbs, and those attachment points. There's different types of cartilage that is also found associated with the skeletal system. Throughout the body, you have cartilage in its different types. Articular cartilage. This is found on the end of the bones at movable joints. So we see them, say, like with the arms and the legs, where two bones come together and that joint is movable, because not all of your joints are movable, but where they are movable, the bone is going to be covered in that movable section at the joint area by articular cartilage. Costal cartilage is what connects the ribs to the sternum. Costal refers to the rib area. Laryngeal cartilage is found in the voice box or in the larynx. Tracheal and bronchial are found associated with the respiratory system. The nasal, your external nose, is actually cartilage. Between the discs, to separate the vertebral disc and help to cushion it, you find the intervertebral disc, which is a type of cartilage, and then also your external ear. So these are just various examples. When we look at the bones, we will classify them very generally as to what type of bone they are. They may be long bones, short bones, flat bones. Those names obviously make sense when you look at the structure of the bone. And then we also have irregular, meaning it doesn't really fit into any other group. If you look at, this is a vertebrae right here, it's an odd shape. It doesn't fit in any of the other categories, so we just classify it as irregular. Sutural bones will be found most in the skull, and then sesamoid. An example of a sesamoid bone is your patella or your kneecap. The bones have markings on them. There's various types of markings, various reasons why these markings are there. One whole group of markings is due to the attachment of muscles and ligaments. So things such as along the lines, spines, process, tuberosities, etc. Now, in your lab manual, you do have, and in your textbook, these bone markings tables. So it's very helpful to be able to look at the name of the bone marking, and it gives the description and often gives you an example of where you would find this. Other types of bone markings are used to help form joints, such as like the rounded head of, say, the femur, how it's going to fit into the joint, or maybe the facet. And then other bone markings may be depressions that allow for the bone vessel, the blood vessels and the nerves to fit into place that are feeding that bone, supplying it with nutrients, supplying it with the nerve supply, or to be able to pass through. And so some of these are things like grooves. Foramens tend to be larger openings, holes, if you will, that, such as the foramen magnum, which is found at the base of the skull, allows for the spinal cord to be able to come up to the brain and connect to the brain. Fossa is another example. So when you're studying the bones, you can see these various markings gives you an idea as to the type of marking, what the purpose of it is for, like I said, whether it's for attachment of a muscle or whether it's to allow blood vessels to pass from the exterior to the interior of maybe the cavity. And you start to see how all the systems have to work together. We tend to study them separately, but they all have to work together. So the chart is a good thing to have. This is showing the anatomy of a long bone. There are different terms that we will use with this. The diaphysis is what is commonly referred to as a shaft. It's this long section right through here. And then the epiphysis is going to be the ends. The proximal epiphysis is going to be closest to that point of attachment. The distal epiphysis is going to be further away from the point of attachment to the torso. As we mentioned earlier, when you have a bone that's involved with the joint on the ends, and this is going to be with a movable joint, you do have that articular cartilage. You see that on both ends here. With the bone, you tend to have on the interior spongy bone, and it gets its name. It does look like an open sponge. It's much lighter weight than the compact bone that's on the exterior surface. You do have the medullary cavity in the middle here of the long bone that is going to be filled with marrow. It could be either yellow marrow or red marrow. And then right here, the epiphyseal line, this is where you have the growth occurring in this way towards the ends of the bone. If we look a little bit more detailed here in the medullary cavity, as I said, in this particular case, you have yellow bone marrow. You have the compact bone that is surrounding it. The endosteum right here is a membrane, and then on the outer, surrounding the outer surface of the bone, is the periosteum. So the endosteum is on the interior portion, lining that medullary cavity, and then lining the bone itself is the periosteum. It tends to be held or attached to the compact bones, held in place so it doesn't slide all over the place, by these, they're known as perforating fibers, also known as Sharpey's fibers. So that's what this fiber here is showing, attaching it to that compact bone itself. And then you'll notice that you do have blood vessels that will come in. The bone is actively growing, so it needs to have nutrients, it needs oxygen, it needs to get rid of waste products, and so it needs to have a very good blood supply to it. And as you can see here, you typically will have blood vessels lining along grooves of the bone, and then they'll pass through the periosteum and move into the compact bone, and then travel up these canals. These openings are referred to canals, so that the bone that is actively growing does get a good nutrient supply. This is, once again, another cross-section of the bone. So out here you have your periosteum layer, and then you've got your articular cartilage if it's on the joint. You have your compact bone, you've got your good blood supply coming in, and then this is compact bone, and this open area here is your spongy bone. So notice once again you've got blood vessels infiltrating through there. This is spongy bone is much lighter weight, so the bone overall is not as heavy.